Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wallace. How are you? I'm sorry I'm out today. My husband has a medical procedure and I need to go and to be there. So I'm just going to do some simple videos that give you the answers to some of the worksheets that you did on Thursday and Friday. So if you have not yet done the worksheet that you're looking at on the screen, you want to do the worksheet. You want to do it first and then turn off the video, or whatever, do the worksheet, then turn the video on so that way you can check your work. And you do have a free response question or two. Likely there'll be two of them tomorrow in class. So use this class time to kind of work on these problems so that way you can make sure that you're comfortable for the quiz tomorrow. And any questions that you have, just send me an email. I'm also going to drop a video about taxes. This is new content, new information, and I will put a practice problem for you so that you can work on that this morning as well. So the practice quizzy questions, this kind of gives you a little bit of exposure to some of the types of things you're likely to see tomorrow. The free response question format we'll note when we go over the free response question worksheet. So the first one in this is a little quick supply and demand practice. Assume the following: laptop and desktop computers are substitutes, and unless you're given information that products are substitutes in production, that would tell us it's a supply curve thing. The firm would be making both laptops and desktop computers. Unless it says substitutes in production, assume when you see it like this, we're talking about substitutes for the consumer, right? Laptops, desktop computers, a consumer might buy one or the other. And that's the way in which it might be a substitute. Laptops and DVD burners, I think on your sheet, it says chargers or something like that. You probably don't even know what a DVD burner is, but one of the things, laptops and DVD burners are complements. We mean in consumption. Using up or down arrows show the impact of a change in technology that improves only the production of laptop computers on the following. So the first thing we're going to do is graph this change in technology, which we know is a productivity enhancement. It's going to affect the supply curve for laptops. So if you look to the graph that's up in this top left corner, and it's messy, of course, because Mrs. Wallace has really messy handwriting, but you can see the supply shift to the right because of the increase in technology and an increase in productivity. As a result of that, we have a decrease in the price of laptops and we have an increase in the quantity of laptops. So that is indicated, right? This demand curve for laptops, we've had a change in supply and as a result, a change in price and a change in output. What happens to the price of desktop computers? Well, if desktop computers are substitute goods, what happens to the price? Well, we know that laptops, everybody is looking to get more laptops because the price is lower. As a result of that, if people are buying more laptops, they're buying fewer desktops. We see a decrease in demand, which a shift in demand, because this is now the price of laptops affecting the demand for desktop computers. We're seeing a decrease in the price of desktops and a decrease in the quantity of desktops. On the other hand, complementary goods with laptops, including a DVD burner, but let's also say a charger, they're also, going off the shelves. And in this case, we see an increase in demand for those complementary goods, which we would then have an increase in price, and an increase in quantity. Okay, so very, very straightforward. In this case, next question, the cost of producing automobiles increases. Okay, so the cost of production increases. This is going to be a supply shift left. Okay, why? Because inputs or some labor cost, metal cost, or whatever, producing automobiles is more expensive for the producers. Okay, this is not something that it may affect consumers in the kind of long run, but right now, let's assume we're talking about production. If the cost of producing automobiles increases, supply shifts left, the price, equilibrium, quantity, and consumer surplus are going to change in which of the following ways, okay? Well, if I demonstrate this leftward or upward supply shift left, I can easily see that the equilibrium price is going to be greater. I also can see that the equilibrium quantity is going to be lower than it was before. So in comparison to the first equilibrium quantity and price, the price is higher and the quantity is lower. Okay, so that gets me like halfway to the answer. So for the most part, it can be correctly answer C. The other question on here is consumer surplus. And remember, consumer surplus is really telling us, it's a measure of efficiency. How much do consumers essentially get a good deal, and how much of the demand curve is going to be captured by transactions, made by consumers? What I can tell is the consumer surplus, even though we have an equilibrium price in both cases, in the first case, the consumer surplus is like this entire triangle, right? When the price increases, and that makes sense intuitively, right? Price increases are going to hurt consumers. The consumer surplus is now going to be a dollar amount that's going to be significantly less, right? The area of this triangle is a lot smaller than, the area of this triangle, okay? So remember, for consumer surplus, we're looking at, this new consumer surplus is what is the price? So the price is one thing we're looking at, and then we're also looking at that price, where do we see consumer demand? Okay, and the consumers that used to be purchasing quantities between Q1 and Q star, are no longer in the market when the price increases. Okay, there's just not that degree of consumption. For this very one right here, this is a next question about shortages and surpluses. Refer to the table. So now we're using data rather than using a graph. Think of this data as a graph, right? We have the curves right here. We have the price, which would go on your y-axis, and we have quantity demanded and quantity supplied. This would be curves that we would just plot, right? So at the price of $60, what's the quantity demanded? At the price of $40, what's the quantity demanded? What's the price of $30? What's the quantity demanded? And then you would do the same thing with quantity supplied. So we only see in this case an equilibrium in one price, one equilibrium price. Okay. So before the price increase, right? If I'm looking at this and I wanted to see what was the equilibrium price would be $30 because the quantity demanded at $30 is 220. The quantity supplied is 220. Once we are given this question and demand increases by 100 units, I'm just doing this simple addition to say, instead of, at the price of 60, instead of 100, now I have 200. At the price of 50, instead of 140, now I have 240. So I've added 100 units to every single quantity demanded. And we are also imagining a price control of $40. What will happen? So the first question is kind of, what is the equilibrium, the new equilibrium with this added 100 units? And no longer is my equilibrium where it was before at $30, because now 220 quantity supplied does not equal 320 quantity demanded, right? We actually, at this equilibrium, have a bit of a shortage. There's not enough supply, to meet quantity supplied to meet the quantity demanded. But because we've added that 100, and I'm looking at what is the new equilibrium, I'm going to go up right here, 280 and 280. My equilibrium price is now going to be 40. So if the government comes in and sets a price control of 40, there's no shortage or surplus because $40 is the equilibrium price. Okay, so in this case, no shortage or surplus. Okay, if the price was $60, right, and then we were looking at $40 being equilibrium, we mandate 100, what would happen? Our quantity supplied would be greater than our quantity demanded. Okay, if we had a different price, we would have some type of deadweight loss. Which of the following would cause a rightward shift in the supply curve for T-Mobile's cell service? The correct answer is A, a decrease in the wages of telecommunications workers. We know an increase in wages would increase costs and decrease the supply curve, shifting it left. In the case of a decrease in wages, the opposite happens. The supply curves will shift to the right. When the supply curve shifts rightward, we're going to see, what we're asked, what would cause a rightward shift in the supply curve. And it's the only thing that can. Number 5 was the one that was probably a little bit trickier. So let's just kind of go over this one. Suppose there's 1,000 one-bedroom apartments in a small town and the number is fixed, okay? Sometimes you're going to see a question like this, and you can see on the graph above how you would graph this. This is an example of not an upward sloping supply curve. even if people in the real estate market wanted to, if rent prices started to increase and they wanted to offer greater supply, we assume in the immediate market period, they really can't. They can't just snap their fingers and have triple the amount of apartments. So some goods just don't turn over that easily, and at least for a short amount of time. Maybe, over the course of a year, more apartments could be built. But if we're looking at the immediate market period, 1,000 apartments would be graphed as a vertical supply curve. It's fixed, okay? And of course, the demand curve would still be downward sloping. So you can have increases in demand. And when we consider the example of the Taylor Swift concert, right, to a certain degree, there's a fixed supply. Taylor Swift is doing X amount of concerts. There's X amount of seats in every stadium for that concert. At the end of the day, there's only so many tickets, and those tickets are fixed, right? If she was to open up, more, places, to sing, then that would be different. But based on, her time and what is actually possible, there is no way to really extend that supply curve as an upward sloping curve, over the course of how many, to make it equal to the quantity demanded. There's other issues too, of course, the power of, Ticketmaster and whichever, Live Nation and all those things. But this question, first of all, you're given a table. Suppose there are 1,000 one-bedroom apartments and the number's fixed. The table gives the quantity demanded for one-bedroom apartments. So one thing I did was I added supply on the right, and because it's fixed, the quantity supplied is always 1,000. Okay, so it's just going to be constant at 1,000, and the price and demand information is there. So if I'm looking for an equilibrium price, right, for the very first part A, what is the equilibrium rental price for a one-bedroom apartment? Well, that's going to be really straightforward. It's going to be $800 because the quantity demanded is 1,000 and the quantity supplied is 1,000. It's the only price where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. If I was graphing that, I would have an equilibrium price at 800, equilibrium quantity at 1,000. Okay, so that's straightforward. Now we say, well, what happens if 200 new apartments get constructed, right? So now we've added 200 to every single supply. Sorry, this is a supply thing. If 200 new bedroom apartments. So now supply is not 1,000, but it's 1,200. What happens? Okay, so in this case, I'm going to use this original demand information. Just ignore this other demand information for a moment. But I'm going to look at the rental price has now gone down, right? Because the supply has increased to 1,200. Now we're going to see the rental price be a little bit lower at 700 now because quantity supplied equals quantity demanded at 700. Now more people move into town. This is a demand increase, increasing the demand for one-bedroom apartments by 200. Okay, so now we're looking at the second demand column. Everything is increased by 200. What is the new equilibrium price? Okay, so at 1,200 for supply, that's fixed. Where do I see 1,200 here? It's going to be back up to the price of 800. So the equilibrium price is 800. The equilibrium quantity is now 1,200. Okay, very straightforward. What is the producer and consumer surplus? And for part E, if the government sets a binding price ceiling for apartments at 600, what happens to deadweight loss? Does it increase, decrease, or stay the same? Does consumer surplus increase, decrease, or stay the same? Okay, so before we look at the price ceiling, let's just look at consumer surplus and producer surplus with this vertical supply curve. It just looks a little weird. So it's good to have a little bit of exposure to this. Consumer surplus, okay, consumer surplus. Here's the price of the good. It's an equilibrium price at 800. This is the quantity supplied and demanded, 1,200. Your consumer surplus is the shaded region. And sometimes you are asked to shade consumer surplus. Sometimes you are asked to calculate it in dollars. So if you have to do that, use the area of a triangle, 1/2 times base times height. Okay, and if you're given numbers, you can actually calculate that, and it's in dollars. Okay, but in this case, you're asked to shade it. So that would be consumer surplus right here, this shaded triangle. Producer surplus, typically can be a triangle or even a trapezoid. in this case, you have an entire square. Okay, so you're looking at everything that producers